I'm just about to announce him on stage. Go find him, Graham. Because everything they say about the CFZ is true. In that, you just saw Graham come rushing to see Richard with some heavy-duty painkillers. Because Richard's foot has given out. My pancreas has nearly given out, and my diabetes is already nasty. Is he? Well, tell him to come in. Richard, in, dear boy. Here he is, the CFZ's Mr. Entertainment. CFZ's Mr. Entertainment, he can't actually stand up. We've just had to send Graham back to burgle my medicine cabinet to get something so he can actually get through the rest of the evening. And I know we're running horribly late, so he's going to cut it short, but we're here all day tomorrow, and if anybody wants to talk to Richard afterwards, or at my place, or whatever, he, I'm sure, will be quite happy to answer your questions. Rasputin wasn't Richard Russia's greatest love machine. I think it was Rich Freeman, Russia's greatest love machine, talking about his expedition to the Corsica gas. May I introduce to you Mr. Richard Freeman.
Thank you. This exhibition came about over the course of about 2 years. About 2 years ago, I heard about a guy called Gregory Panchenko, who's a Ukrainian biologist who has been studying a creature called the almasty in the mountains of Russia, in the Caucasus Mountains, in an area called Kabardino-Balkaria in the southwest of Russia. Now, he believed that the creatures in this area were on the increase. He thought that this particular area, the population was burgeoning, and there was a very good chance of contact with these creatures in this particular area. Indeed, he had seen these things on 4 separate occasions. One time in a barn on a remote farm, when he was hiding under some hay, he saw an immature male almasty from a distance of only about 4 metres. But before I go any further, can we have the first slide? I'd like to explain what the almasty is. There's a picture of an almasty. It's what we call a relic hominid. It's much more closely related to man than the Yeti is. It's smaller than the Yeti or the Sasquatch. It's much more human-like. Rather than an ape, the Yeti is almost certainly a giant ape. This thing is a hominid. It's a very close relative of man. In fact, it is a type of very primitive man, much more primitive than the Neanderthal. This is what we think the almasty is. That's a reconstruction of one. They have a sort of high domed head like that, thick brow ridge here, very powerful jaws, very little chin, very hairy, and the females have long pendulous breasts. Can we have the next photograph, please? That's Gregory Panchenko. He's the Ukrainian biologist I've been talking about. I was trying to get Gregory Panchenko to get hold of him for ages now. Was anybody here last year?
Yes.
Yeah. You may have seen him talk.
You find Almasty, he's a legend of Almasty.
He sounds a bit like a more nervous version of Borat. But, we finally managed to get in contact with him. We got him over to the Weird Weekend, and we said we'd like to do an expedition with him. We've been planning this for a while when we were contacted by a production company called October Films that wanted to make a documentary about our trip to Russia, with the possibility, if it was well received, of there then being a series of different expeditions around the world looking at different creatures. So these people from October Films came and filmed us doing various things. They filmed me at the zoo, they filmed Dr. Chris Clark in his office. Well, actually they didn't film him in his office, he wasn't allowed to film in his office. They filmed him at a table somewhere. And generally were a royal pain in the arse and got in the way an awful lot. And in the end they didn't even come because they couldn't get the visas to go to this particular area of Russia because it was sensitive. So they pulled out at the last minute, but we did manage to get a couple of £1,000 off them towards the expedition. So went out to Coelina Valcaria, myself, Dr. Chris Clark, Adam Davis, who you saw earlier on, Adam's mate Keith. Give him a wave, Keith, if you're up there. There he is. And Dave Archer. Dave, you in the audience? Oh yeah, there's Dave Archer at the back. This was Dave's first expedition, and the thing about the CFZ is that anyone can come on an expedition. If they've got something to offer, they're welcome to come along on an expedition, and it was Dave's first one, and he did a magnificent job, it has to be said. Right, can we have the next photograph, please? I won't bore you with the interminable 10-hour wait at Moscow airport and other things like that, because this is once again a very, very much truncated version due to lack of time. The first area we stopped in was a series of mountains called the Mother-in-Law's Teeth, because they look like ragged, jagged old hag's teeth. That particular one is called White Rock. Now, up there is a cave where Gregory Panchenko discovered parts of a human-like skull. They appear to be parts of a human-like skull, but the bone is much thicker than any human bone. We got that bagged up and brought it back with us. But we decided to have a few days here setting up camera traps and exploring. Can we have the next photo, please? That is not the skull Gregory Panchenko found. That's something entirely different. Now, this particular area of the Caucasus, they only put a road up there in the year 2000, and about 3 vehicles come along it on a busy day. But when they were putting the road up there, they cut through dozens and dozens of tombs. There are about 1,000 tombs in this area from a race of people called the Sarmatians, who originated in Iran, in northern Iran, and moved into this area and were there from about the 2nd century to about the 7th century. Funny thing about them, a lot of the slaves had their heads bound, which made their skulls grow in a very bizarre way. If you can see there, there's 2 differently shaped skulls. You've got the rounded skull at the top and a strange sort of skull there at the bottom with that very odd shape. These tombs were literally everywhere. Our first campsite was right next to one. There were human bones and skulls sticking out all over the place. 2 of the people we went with were archaeologists, as well as Gregory Panchenko. We had this brilliant guy called Anatoly, who was an archaeologist, and he didn't speak much English, aside from Richard, we need a vodka. And a Russian guy called Alexei, who was also an archaeologist. Right next to our camp, can we have the next slide, please? That's another Sarmatian skull, and there's a rib there as well. Right next to the camp, there was a tomb where some of the road workers had got a tractor and a big thick piece of wire, pulled the top off it and messed around in this tomb. And Anatoly and Alexei were having to do the best they can in a very badly damaged area, but they were finding all sorts of stuff. They were finding jewellery, looking glasses, all sorts of things. And this was all being catalogued and sent back to the museum. Next one, please. There, that's side of a tomb. You can see it's been cut away. And the next one, please. You see, it's just eroding away there, loads of human bones and other artefacts just falling out. And there's dozens upon dozens upon dozens of these things. Next one, please. There. That is White Rock shrouded in mist. So we trekked up quite steep incline to White Rock to have a look around these caves where Gregory had found parts of the skull. We found and bagged some dung and another lot of dung, but I'm quite suspicious that's probably bear. We set up some motion sensor camera traps and went back the next day to look for them, but unfortunately the only things they had taken was the rising and the falling of the sun, rising and the setting of the sun rather. Nothing interesting on them at all. Next photograph please. That's Alexei up near White Rock. Dave went right the way to the top in some quite severe wind poking around these little places. There were lots of very small shallow caves we went to. Next one please. That's Anatoly, the vodka swing archaeologist. Next one please. And that's Hummer the crypto dog. She's a dog that was found abandoned on the streets of the Ukrainian city and was adopted by Alexei, and now comes on all his adventures, and she followed us everywhere, and she was delightful. And instead of saying arf, like English dogs, she said arfsky. Because she's a Russian dog. Okay, next one please. That's Dave entering one of the caves and having a good poke around, although we didn't really find much there. Next one please. That's another view of one of the caves. Next one please. Yeah. That's Adam on his way up to check some camera traps. Next one please. This is the next area we went to. So, we didn't have much luck in the first area. It was very interesting. We didn't find much. Keith and I went out to a forest one day and we saw some scratch marks in a tree that looked to be done more like the nails of something with human-like hands rather than the claws of a bear. Shortly thereafter, we found a piece of hair I got very excited about, bagged up. We found another bit, then another bit, and a great clump of it, and then suddenly it dawned on me, it was almost certainly wild boar. From a distance, it looked like these woods were covered with grass, but when you get up close to it, they're not. They're 6 to 8 foot tall stinging nettles, and it's very steep and slippery, and was really nasty terrain. Anyway, we moved on. There was a story of a man called Sergit, who several years ago, well actually it was about 12 years ago, on a mountain had come across the carcass of a female almasty that had been killed by a rockfall. He had taken the tooth from it, and he'd still got this tooth, and he knew the general area where the body had been, and hopefully still was, trapped under the rocks. So this sounded very, very promising. So we decided to go to this other area to check out this alleged carcass. Now, we had been camping in tents in the first area, which was quite fun. We had a jackal come through one night, making a god-awful noise, and we all went tearing out to try and photograph it, but it haired away into the distance, and we couldn't photograph it. This time, we stopped at a little sort of tourist camp, where they had delightful little Moomin-esque shacks, which were very nicely painted, so we could actually sleep on beds for once. And they had little bars and restaurants there, because it was rather like the Russian version of Switzerland. We met this man, Sergit, and through the interpreter, his daughter, Tanya, who I thought was quite pretty, but everybody else thought was a bit of a boiler. There's no accounting for taste. Maybe it's because I've been in the mountains too long. We were told that this body was about half an hour's walk up this mountain, this particular mountain here. And I can't recall the name of the mountain without going back and looking at my notes. But it was given several names by us later in the day. Now, Sergit was dressed in sort of like hush puppies and, you know, a pullover. He said, half an hour up the mountain, this is where this body is. And I thought, it's odd that no one's gone and got this body if it's only half an hour up the mountain, but, you know, let's go and have a look. So we went off into this mountain and we walked for a bit, you know, a little bit steep, but nothing we couldn't handle, until we got to the snow line. And we paused for a bit and I thought, oh yes, it's going to be here. not too difficult terrain, we should be able to find something if it's still around. But then Sir carried on walking, getting higher and higher, and we were all dressed in like just t-shirts and things, like we were out for a stroll in the park. And when we come across this massive big boulder that's about half as big as this room, that's covered in plaques, and I thought, well, that's interesting, I wonder what that's all about. There were about 24 plaques for people who had been killed on this mountain that we're going ever higher into. Following what is euphemistically termed as tracks, which soon petered out, and we found ourselves on one side there's a retreating glacier that's carved a sheer cliff, then there's a load of murderous scree, and then there was like frozen snow and ice at a terrible angle, which was about as slippy as an ice rink. And at one time we were compelled to cross this. Now, everybody else managed to get across. I take one step out, my leg goes straight through the snow, I fall down, stick goes flying out of my hand, suddenly I'm on my belly, sliding down backwards like a tobogganist, very fast, down a great sheet of ice. Now, I quickly realised that this sheet of ice, I'm going to get faster and faster and faster along this sheet of ice, which leads to jagged rocks about 300 foot below. So, cryptozoologist puree is going to be on the menu very quickly. So, thinking fast, I sort of swing myself round on my stomach and ram my feet into the scree and managed to slow myself down and eventually stop. And I realised there's no way I can get across this sheet of ice, I'm just too heavy. And I'll just slide down it. So I have to retreat whilst the others go up and disappear into the distance. Eventually they get to the area, but by the time they get there, because we didn't start till 4 o'clock, because we were told it was only half an hour's walk, more or less, the minute they get there, they have to turn back because the light's fading. Now on the way back, we all get split up again. I take the wrong path and end up on this crumbly cliff that the glacier has carved out. And every so often the glacier rumbles ominously and you hear rocks clattering in the distance. Walking along this cliff when the cliff gives way and leaves me hanging a la Indiana Jones off some branches off a 50-foot drop onto nice stabby ice. So I managed to haul myself up, get back down. So that's twice in one day this mountain has had a go at killing me, and twice I've survived. We all get back down again and go for some kebabs and vodka, which I think we've earned. The next day, we stupidly try and go up again, and the only sensible person in any of this is Keith, who's saying basically, sold that for a game of soldiers, I'm staying in the little Luminesque shack. We go up again, and this time we go a way that avoids the ice. Why we crossed the ice in the first place, I don't know. But we managed to get up to a way that avoids the ice. We get up to about 9,500 feet on some very sheer inclines with very loose rocks, when suddenly I start having blackouts, rather like camera irises shutting like that. And I realise it must be altitude sickness, because I'm completely blacking out, and I'm realising I can't see where I'm going with this like 9,500 foot drop. So I thought it might be a good idea if I sit down for a bit. So I sat down for a bit. The others went on, reached this area and started to have a look around, but they realised there's too many of them there in a very treacherous, steep area. So several people come back, and Dave stays on because Dave's job basically is digging up roads, so he's good at digging. So he stays on. We wind our way back to camp, and we wait around camp, and then Dave reappears and he's holding a body bag. Ooh, what's happened? He hasn't actually found the body, but he stumbled across a cave. Can we have the next? That's another view. That's the glacier there in the background retreating. And the next one, please. That's Gregory Panchenko in this cave they found, which had a nest made out of dwarf rhododendron in it. Something had bitten off this dwarf rhododendron, made a nest. Inside the nest was scat and hair, and the hair had medullas on it. So it's one of two things. It's either a bear or it's an almasty. Next slide, please. This was brought back. We all got our gloves on and we went through it very finely, getting out all the hair and all the scat, bagging it all up. So we're very pleased with that. Next day, Dave goes up for a third crack at this mountain. Can we have the next slide, please? There it is again. Bloody thing. Gets right the way to the top. We elect to go off and interview some witnesses, because I've had more than my fill of this mountain. We were told that there was an old man in a nearby village that had seen this creature, the almasty, when he was young. It turns out it wasn't him at all. This guy's 80-odd, and it was his dad that saw it when he was a teenager, which would have put this sighting way back in probably in the 1890s. What had happened was that this man's father had entered a part of their house where the ceiling had fallen down. It was about midday, and he saw this creature sitting in a chair. The creature looked up at him. It was covered with hair, and it had very red eyes, and he says he interprets that not as that they were glowing red, but they were like his. They were sort of very venal. The creature saw him, brought its head forward, and like it had this mane of hair, and it fell over its face like that, and he shut the door immediately and cleared off. The man's father had also seen a very large snake in the area, about 4 metres long, and that was in the 1960s, and he said it was moving quite fast and throwing up dust and dirt as it went. There's a tradition in the Caucasus Mountains of immensely big snakes. I can't remember if any of you recall from last year, Gregory told us about these huge black snakes up to 10 metres long. I think they're probably some sort of giant colobrid. He reckons that the so-called lake monsters in the Caucasus are actually these things when they've been seen swimming with their necks out of the water. Anatoly, one of our guides, had seen one of these creatures. He'd seen it in a cave. He'd been lowered into a cave and he'd seen this thing in the water swimming away from him. He reckoned it was about 7 metres or 23 feet long. Anatoly had also seen an almasty on an abandoned farm in the 1980s when he'd been staking it out, hiding, and he said it come within about 4 metres of him. He described it as powerfully built, grey fur, long muscular arms, big brow ridge, pointed head. He'd seen it sideways on, and it had gone past him within 4 metres. Right, can we have the next slide, please? Ah, yes. We moved on again to a little town called Neutrino. Now, if you were at my last talk, I was telling you about Georgetown and how it was the nastiest, meanest, most spiteful feeling place I've ever been to. Now, Neutrino wasn't like that at all, but it had an air of overwhelming depression and helplessness and hopelessness about it. It was everything you imagine in crumbling Eastern Bloc cliches to be. Blocks of ugly, nasty grey flats, half of them abandoned. Well, not actually abandoned, never finished, because when the Soviet Union broke up, the money dried up and the unemployment rate there is something like 90%. It's very, very depressing. Remarkably beautiful women there. They all look like goths without even trying. They have beautiful black hair and pallid skin and lovely big eyes. An amazing thing we saw there, we were 8 adult men were sharing this tatty little flat. Keith described it as the snide flat. It was really ugly, nasty, Spartan. Sometimes there was electricity, sometimes there wasn't. Sometimes there was hot water, sometimes there wasn't. Never at the same time. Keith was out on this veranda and he says, there's a cow out here eating a fire. And indeed there was. We went to investigate and there was this cow happily munching down on a fire. Another cow came along, tried to eat some of the fire. The first cow chased it off and went on eating the fire. Anyway, in Neutrino, well, just outside of Neutrino, there were some caves that were supposed to have human or human-like bones in them, but they hadn't been properly investigated yet, so we went to investigate those. Also, there was an abandoned farmhouse a couple of miles outside of the town that had quite an interesting story to it. Back in 1973, it had been owned by an old couple, or so the story went. The old man had put some money to one side and he was going to use it to buy something. No one quite seems to know what it was he was going to buy, but some of his relatives got wind of this, didn't like the idea, and went round to try and get the money off the old man. There was a bit of an altercation. The old man got knifed, but his missus got hold of the knife, killed his murderer. Then the other two rogues that remained murdered the old woman, then tried to make it off to the mountains, but were picked up by the police. Ever since, no one's lived there. A few years ago, 3 Bulgarian shepherds were supposed to be using it as a place to drink, just hanging out there one night, drinking vodka. And there are 3 rooms in this farm, and then around the outside goes a sort of L-shaped veranda with a door at one end. They said that the door opened up, a massive male almasty came onto the veranda, picked one of the guys up, moved him out of the way like he was a toy, walked along to the end of the veranda, jumped off and disappeared into the night. So we thought we'd stake that out as well. So Adam and Dave went and staked this place out, whilst Keith, Chris and myself went to have a look at these caves. Now the caves weren't so much caves, they were more sort of hollows because they'd all fallen in. And Gregory sort of squeezed inside them with his trowel and had a look round, and he brought out some bones, but the bones were transparently those of a modern human. They were probably of an old woman because she had lost most of her teeth. There was only one tooth in the jaw, but there were some larger leg bones, but they look human as well. But we brought them along, bagged them up, just in case they had anything odd in their DNA. In the meantime, back at the ranch, it was bitterly cold. Anatoly said that he'd heard a vocalisation that sounded, he thought it was a male almasty calling for a mate. And Adam had heard something odd crashing around, but nothing much more happened. What they'd done was boiled up some honey and red wine in the hope that the scent would attract the creatures. So we thought we'd have another crack at it the following night. In the meantime, in the daytime, we decided to go up a mountain called Gushgit. I think it's called Gushgit, this place. Because there'd been an avalanche, well, they had it in winter, there'd been avalanches, and the avalanches kill animals, and the almasty is supposed to come down and devour the dead animals. So we decided to go see if there was any of these animal carcasses around, anything like footprints or anything like that. Can we have the next? Oh, they're the bones. There's a part of a pelvis there as well, some ribs. Next one, please. Right. We went up to this place called, I believe it's called Gashgit, if memory serves me well. And I'm a bit tired at the minute, so it might not. We were approaching the foothills of it in some deep vegetation when suddenly there's this awful bellowing sound from the bushes. And Gregory says, "That's no animal I know of." And we thought, hang on, have we surprised a sleeping almasty? And it's in those bushes. It was a god-awful sound, whatever this thing was making. And I thought, hang on, this is it. It's in these bushes. So we all split up. None of us showed the least bit of fear. We all split up in a sort of pincer movement, cameras out, crashing through stinging nettles, through streams and stuff, closer to where this noise was coming from. I was expecting boulders to start coming whizzing out of these bushes at any minute. Then something stands up in these bushes. I've got my camera ready, and it's Alexei, who'd snuck up in front of us, hidden, and made roaring noises to scare us. So, we go up this mountain, and Gregory has told us we might have to cross a few streams. And Gregory has this thing, he sort of says, it seems to me that the best way for us is to go this way, which always turns out to be the most murderous and dangerous way of going. And these little streams were actual mountain rivers that were really getting quite progressively more dangerous. They were rapids, actually. And alongside each of them were jagged, slippery rocks that we had to climb up. We got this exhausting climb up to there, found one dead cow, it was too rancid for anything to eat. Had something to eat, not the cow, some stuff we took with us, and then started to come back down again. The rapids were getting nastier and nastier, and at one area we thought, how the hell are we going to get across? So we found a big log, hauled it across. Gregory runs across this rock, he's very nimble, he's an alpinist. Gets to the other side, he braces one end, Dave braces the other. Right, I start to go across, when suddenly the power of the water just wrenches my legs from under me, and I'm being sucked away by the rapids to get smashed to bits on the rocks. Gregory managed to grab me by the scruff of the neck, haul me out. Exactly the same thing happens to Chris, who's about half my weight. He's nearly taken away like a bit of flotsam by these rapids. Luckily we managed to drag him out. So, by my count now, that's 4 times Russia has tried to kill me, and it's not managed, so I'm starting to feel a bit like Rasputin now. Anyway, we get back to the Snide Flat, dry off, and then Dave, Adam and myself and Anatoly decide we're going to go and stake out the abandoned farm again. So we get to the farm. Luckily, it's a lot warmer this night. So we all take up our positions, and we're there for a good 9 hours. But the hours seem to fly by. It's just there staring off into the darkness. And around the farmhouse are other little farm buildings, all abandoned. We set up the camera traps. Then about 10:30 at night, there's like a twittering noise, sounding like a bird. And then one of the camera traps goes off. Now, I know one of the vocalisations the Almasty is supposed to make is a bird-like twittering. When Gregory encountered one in a remote barn, he said it was smacking its lips up and then making bird-like twittering sounds. So, we have a quick look around, nothing there, we go back to our posts. Now, from 12 o'clock till 3 in the morning, it's meant to sort of quieten down, there's not much happens. And then after 3, it kicks off again. So we go into one of the buildings, the actual inside of one of these rooms in the farmhouse that's by the veranda. And Dave's getting a bit of shut-eye, and Anatoly's gone off and disappeared into the night. We don't know where he's gone. He hasn't come back yet. So it's Adam and I by this little stove in the corner. There's a big door about 7 feet tall, and it's a couple of inches ajar. Starlight is streaming in, and we're sitting there silently, just waiting. Then all of a sudden, there's a very deep, guttural vocalisation. The closest I can come to it phonetically is "bo bo bo bo," but very much more throaty and deep. And I said to Adam, "Did you hear that?" He said, "Yeah." Then moments later, something passes by the door and blocks out the starlight as it goes. Whatever this thing is, it's big enough to block out all of the starlight up to the top of the 7-foot door. I said to Adam, "Did you see something go by there?" He said, "Yeah, there's something on the veranda." We whip out our cameras, go dashing out onto the veranda, and find just silence and darkness. Now, did I get within 12 feet of a relic hominid? I can't say that I did. I don't know. But something went by on that veranda tall enough to block out the starlight. But whatever it was as swift and as silent as a cat. So, we do a circuit of the farm, can't find anything. Can't find Anatoly. We start to get worried. Has he tripped up and hurt himself? Has he been attacked by a bear? We don't know. In the morning we find him sleeping in one of these outhouses. So, we go back again to the snide flat with this strange story. Nothing turns up of interest on any of the camera traps. Can we have the next... That's the veranda, the thing, whatever it was, went along. So it must have come along there and leapt out one of those openings at the end. Next one, please. That's Anatoly cooking up the bait, the red wine and the honey. The next one, please. That's Dave near the little stove. Next one, please. This is some... That's the farmhouse from the outside. Next one, please. That's another view of it. That's the door where the Almaster was supposed to have come through. And the next one, please. Now, that's the mountains in the background, and they reckon the thing was coming down along there and coming down from the mountains into that sort of area there. Now, Gregory says that these things are on the increase. There's more of them being seen in greater numbers and a lot of youngsters being seen, and they approach human habitation sometimes. And he's got lots of stories from his files. One story of a farmer who saw one near his house, threw a stone at it because he thought it was coming to steal food from him, and it ran off round the back of the house. The farmer went to enter his house, was walking towards the door, when this massive boulder comes flying over and narrowly misses him. This thing has picked up a boulder, because it had a stone through it, and flung it over the house. And in the morning it takes two burly men to even lift the thing off the ground. Another story he told us was of one that was attacked by a large Bulgarian shepherd dog, and the Almaster killed it with a club, broke into the farmhouse and stole a big Bulgarian cheese. Now why they want to do that is beyond me, because they taste like rubber. They're bloody awful. There were reams of these stories, and can we have the next? I'm not quite sure where that is actually. I think, no, I've forgotten where that is. Next one, please. Now that was us crossing the rapids. That's one area where one of the areas where we nearly got swept away. Next one, please. That's the avalanche when we finally got up to the top. That's where all that is snow and ice covered with bits of vegetation, old bits of tree that's smashed to pieces. Next one, please. Oh, that's something from the camera trap. The night we heard the weird vocalisation, but nothing on it. Next one, please. Right, we can stop there for a bit. We also went to interview some witnesses. One of the best ones was a guy of about 30 who was the vice president of the national park we were in. And he said about 3 years before he had some sheep escape from a pen and he went off to look for them. And it was twilight and he saw what he thought was a cow lying down. And suddenly what he thought was a cow stood up and he thought it was a very big human-like figure. So he addressed it in Bulgarian and said, have you seen some sheep go past? No answer. He got a bit closer, addressed it in Russian, have you seen some sheep go past? No answer. Got a bit closer, he realised he has this high domed head and it's very big, too big to be a man. And he realises that it's an Almaster. So he stops himself from panicking, tries to think rationally. It's not being aggressive towards him. He goes off to get his uncle, so his uncle can see it. By the time he comes back, it's gone. But he said he glanced back and he saw it walking off up a mountain. And he was a very good witness, very good. Now, it was around about this point that we heard from Sergit again, the guy who said he'd originally found this body. We couldn't locate the body, but there was still the tooth. he said he'd given this tooth to a friend of his who had made it into a sort of a holy charm. So we went to a restaurant where this woman worked. I was expecting some hideous old crone, but she was just a fairly ordinary looking middle-aged woman. And apparently she didn't have it with her. She'd left it with her daughters in a place called Nalchik in their flat, and they'd lost it. And I was thinking, hang on, if this was so important, A, why did he give it away in the first place? And B, why did this woman lose it when she was supposed to have made it into some sort of holy charm? And she got her daughters searching the flat back in Nalchik all day long looking for this. They found an old red cattle that they thought they'd lost, but they didn't find the tooth. And I was getting really suspicious about this whole bloody thing. Anyway, round about this point, Dave, Keith and Adam had to go back to England, so it was just Chris and myself and the Ukrainians and the Russians left. So we had a couple more days in beautiful downtown Neutrino, that great hub of culture. Sergei visits us again with a story saying that the spirits of the Almasty had made the body disappear and they'd hidden the tooth, they'd made the tooth disappear by magic. But he had another relic for us. He had a hair of an Almasty, and it was red, and it was from the Queen of the Almasty, and he'd been told so by jinn, or Islamic spirits. Okay, now, Gregory was translating this for us and rolling his eyes as he did it. This guy was obviously cuckoo. The hair he had given us wasn't hair at all, it was a piece of vegetable fibre. Now, he was mad, but I don't think he was a liar. I think he actually believed his own madness, because otherwise why would he go up the bloody treacherous mountain and hack away at the rocks for hour after hour looking for this body? But I think he believed his own madness. So that line of inquiry, dead in the water. We moved on to another area where we made camp, where there were some more caves that we explored. Next one, please. There's a bunch of caves here. That's my fine explorer's physique there. In these caves, we found a large bare footprint at one point. Let's have the next one. That's some more of us in the caves. Next one, please. Ah, yes, now, before we get to the footprint, there was an abandoned, another abandoned farmhouse here. This is not the same one we were in before. This is a shepherd's place. We decided to have a look around it because the Almasty is often attracted to human habitation. Yeah, we had a good look around, found nothing. Next one, please. There. Now it was in hard earth in a cave in the mountains. You can't see it very well. It was a large bare footprint, a bit larger than mine. It could have been a shepherd, but why you would be up there barefoot, I don't know. But it wasn't good enough to cast. It wasn't anything like good enough to cast. Next one, please. That's it again. You can sort of barely make it out. You can see it better in real life. Next one, please. That's us going up to some more caves. Next one, please. There. We found some more dung, which we bagged up, and some more bones that Gregory thought might just be finger bones. Next one, please. We came upon another abandoned old farmhouse. Next one, please. There. That symbol behind Anatoly there is apparently a Bulgarian tribal symbol. Next one, please. That's a close-up of it. There. Nah, stay there. So we stayed in the mountains for several days. We found, like I say, we found a bit of dung. Nothing much more. So we decided to go and interview some more witnesses. This old man here claimed to have seen Almasty on 4 separate occasions. First time in the 1970s, last time just earlier this year. On 2 of those occasions there were groups of them together. The first time he saw them there was a family group of them together actually sitting down, and he thought they were people at first and called out to them. They got up, looked at him and walked away. He's seen them several times. Another time he said he was with 2 tourists. And Chris, can you remember where he said those tourists were from? Well, they were German, weren't they? Yeah, they were German, yeah. He said he saw a big black male almasty. They're usually either black, brown or this grey colour, going into an abandoned house. And he sort of turned and glared at them. And the 2 Germans he were with were too afraid to go into the house after the thing. So he'd seen them on 4 different occasions. Next slide, please. This old couple here both seen almasty on separate occasions. The old lady had seen one in 1955 in Kazakhstan. Now, a lot of the Bulgarians after the war were deported to Kazakhstan because it was thought they were colluding with Nazis. And while she was in Kazakhstan, she went to her brother's house and found a lot of children crying in a corner and asked them what was wrong. And one of them says, look out of the window. This wasn't a glass window, it was wooden, you had to open it up. She opened it up and it was just beginning to get dark. She said there was this thing in the garden and she described it, well, what she described it sounds rather like Cousin It out of the Addams Family. It had all this mane of hair down in front of its face so you couldn't see its features. And it was sort of standing like that and making movements like that and a whistling noise. And occasionally it would stop and scoop up clay and earth and throw it at the house as if it was amusing itself doing this. And it was there, she said, for over an hour, and the children were terrified of it. But it wasn't really making any aggressive movements, it seemed to be more sort of playing this odd little game. The man, he had seen one just a couple of years before, and it seemed that the one he saw was a juvenile. He had been sitting in his house, and he showed us where all this happened. This very house there, when he heard a stone hit the window. He thought it was his son coming round. He shouted out, come in, the door's open. Nothing happened. Another stone hits the window. He shouts out again, nothing happens. So he goes out to investigate. In the backyard, it's night now, he sees something in the corner. He thinks it's a bale of wool at first, and then it starts to move, and he realises it's an almasty, but a young one, about the size of a 7-year-old child, and it's making sort of gestures as if it wants food. So he takes some bread, gives it some bread, he takes the bread, and he says the hand is very human-like. He never really saw the face, but he had a hair-covered arm, very human-like hand, takes the bread and goes away. But he had the feeling there was a second one hanging around as well, so he left some more bread out, and that was taken away. Can we have the next one, please? So there's some quite interesting sightings. Now the final place we staked out was an old restaurant, and this was great. It was like something out of a Hammer horror film. It was brilliant. This restaurant was all done out like a Bulgarian castle, so you had a tower that's about 45 feet tall, all these outbuildings all done in the style of a castle. It must have been a great place to eat at one time, but it fell into disuse in the 1980s. Can we have the next one, please? That's another view of it. And the next one? That's the tower again. So we set up our camera traps there because a few nights before some police had been hanging out in there. God knows what they were doing, we never did find out. And they heard this unearthly screaming, and these were armed policemen, and they all nicked off sharpish. So it was thought that these vocalisations were the almasty. So Gregory, Chris and myself, we staked the place out and we took turns going on watch. We put up camera traps all over the place. Next photograph, please. Oh, that's another part of the building. Next photograph, please. There, that's a bat. You got a bat. And the next photograph, please. And we got this strange figure on one of the camera traps, which we worked out was actually me after I'd set it and it was going off because they're very sensitive. We stayed there all night, absolutely not a sausage, always saw bats and mice, but it was a very atmospheric, spooky place. And I think that's the last photograph, isn't it? Try it again. Yeah, that's it. Now, that's very much truncated and abridged. There were more stories we heard about very big snakes being seen in Kazakhstan. There were more sightings that I haven't had time to tell you about. If this was just down down to the Volcarians seeing it. They're very superstitious lot. I think it was just a bogeyman. But it's been seen by some very good scientists, including Gregory Panchenko and Anatoly. What do I think it is? I think it's radically different from the Yeti. It's smaller, more human-like. I think it's quite possibly a surviving strain of Homo erectus or something very similar to it. I think that of everywhere in the world, Carbonino-Bulgaria is probably the most promising place for interactions between humans and relic hominids, and I think sooner or later we're going to get some decent proof from there. Now the stuff we've got with us, the stuff we brought back, hair, bone, scat, it's going off to have the DNA analysed, hopefully at Oxford University, but we've also had an offer from the University of Copenhagen, and a gentleman in America has offered to do this as well. So we're going to be waiting with bated breath for the results. I'm also going to be buying some camera traps and sending them over to Gregory, because he said if we had this sort of technology in the past, we would have got it, we would have photographed this thing by now. And he told me so many stories of encounters with these creatures, and I've only just scratched the surface. There's so much more, and you can ask me about it later, or preferably tomorrow. But is there any questions now?
I tell you what, guys, everything that could have gone wrong today has gone wrong. I'm feeling quite pleased with myself at the end of this. We're only 40 minutes late. Richard will be here tomorrow, which will probably be in the bar for a little while now. I was going to bring him down, because we've got pretty well everybody in the expedition team, and we're here.
Yeah.
But we've run out of time. You guys have been absolutely fantastic. 12 hours. 12 hours of pretty well non-stop. I'm really proud of you all. So ladies and gentlemen, first of all, thank you very much, my good friend Richard Freeman. Second, as you've noticed, I can hardly stand up, Richard can hardly stand up. His gout's packed in, my diabetes packed in, and everything that seems to have gone wrong that could have gone. But we've done it, we've ended the second day, and we've given every talk we were going to give. So, tomorrow we'll be back with, I can't remember which order, Ronan, Gail, Mike Hallowell, Michael Woodley, Jeff Ward, and me, I think. So, ladies and gentlemen, I will see you all tomorrow. The bar is still open, books are still for sale, and thank you for attending the 26th ever